My name's Margaret, and I've been involved in the Climate Challenge project, the CCF project at Bannockburn House. And so you all know, CCF is the Climate Challenge Fund, and it was set up by the Scottish Government expressly to encourage communities to grow food, with a view to also educating the community to the fact that if we grow our food locally, it's not travelling as far, so it's not running up air miles and carbon emissions and things like that. So that's where the climate challenge aspect comes into it. But we also want you to understand that growing food can be fun, and it can be tasty, and it can be really delicious. So without sounding too much like Margareta Thunberg, I'm going to pass you over to Kate now. And Kate will just introduce us into the talk, and we'll go from there. Okay, over to you, Kate.
Hi, my screen's totally black. Is everybody else's screen totally black? Or is this just my computer?
I've got the beginning of the presentation.
Okay, it must just be my computer. Fine, I'll just talk at a black screen. So we're going to go through today just some of the things you might have come across when growing your vegetables. Some of you might be new to it, and some of you might be super experienced. So we're not going to manage to cover everything that you might have come across, but this is just a few hints and tips to help you get the most out of growing veg in your gardens, and hopefully give you a few pointers for carrying on into the autumn. So I'll pass over to Margaret, and she's going to start with some of the basics.
So have we got the first slide there then, Ross? Yeah. So weeding and watering, I think most people know a little bit about weeding and watering, but let me just quickly go through that. What is a weed? Well, a weed is a plant growing in the wrong place, basically. It could be anything. You know, if you plant a row of carrots and some dandelions decide to start growing in it, then really that's a weed as far as you're concerned. And what you'll find is weeds are quite often more vigorous than the plants you're trying to grow. So they'll steal the light, they'll steal the water, they'll steal the food, they'll steal the space, more importantly, for the roots and, for example, your beetroot or your carrots, so that they can expand in the soil. So weeds set up competition, and so we want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. And it's always best to try and get weeds when they're tiny. Get them when they're little. It's much easier to get rid of them. If you just kind of lightly disturb the soil, then you'll find that you've uprooted these tiny little seedlings, and they should just dehydrate if it's a warm, sunny day. If you've not had a chance to get the weeds out and they're getting quite big, then your next damage limitation is to make sure that they don't set seeds. So if you can't do anything else, just chop the flowers off, gather them up, put them in the bin. But if you let them set seed, then there's an old folks' tale that says, an old wives' tale that says, 1 year's seeding is 7 years weeding. So, you know, if they set seed and then sprinkle the seeds on your garden, you could be pulling them out for 7 years. So it's best to get in as quickly as possible with the weeds. Watering. Now, plants need water. The seeds usually don't germinate unless they've got water. The plant uses water, excuse me, to move the food around inside the plant. And it uses water to support itself, because if the cells in the stem and things like that are not turgid, then the plant can't stand up and it can't hold itself up to get the sunlight to help it photosynthesize. So how do we water? Right, how do we know? How do we know it's going to water? Well, stick your finger in the soil. That's the first thing. Just stick your finger in about 1/2 inch, move the topsoil out of the way ever so slightly. Stick your finger in, and if it feels dry and dusty, then yeah, your plant probably needs watered. But if it feels quite moist, then you can probably leave it for another day or so. Now, a lot of people think they have to go out water their garden every single day. No, you don't really need to do that unless, you know, you're living in the Sahara Desert or something like that. The most important thing with weeding is to give the plant enough water, and to give it at the point where it can get the most use from it. So if you stand in the garden with a great big hose sprinkling over everything, you'll find the water's just going to go on the leaves and drip down a wee bit onto the soil. Whereas if you actually get your hose and get it right in at the root of the plant, get it in where the stem's coming out of the soil, that's probably your best place to get the water into the plant. So best to water early in the morning, because then the plant's got the benefit, it'll soak up all that water and use it for the whole day. You could water in the evening, but particularly in early spring and late autumn, you're going to find that the temperature will drop at night time, and so your little plant's sitting there with cold, wet feet, and nobody likes cold, wet feet. So don't water it in the middle of the day, because it's going to be so hot, or certainly going to be warmer, and the water should just evaporate really, and you'll not get as much of a benefit from it. So when I went back, when I was talking to you about sprinkling everything with a hose, you want to be really careful. You don't want to get water on the leaves, because if you see little raindrops sitting on the leaf and then the sun comes out, then it can act like a little magnifying glass and it can burn the leaf. So that's not a good idea. But also, if your plants are growing really close together and it's very humid and you get the leaves wet and everything like that, you can get mildew, which is a kind of white powdery fungus that grows across the plant and the flower buds and the vegetables and everything like that, and it can actually start them rotting. So have a look on Google, see what mildew looks like if you're not sure what it is. And if you think you've got mildew, then try and remove it and try and improve the ventilation around your plant and remove that. And another thing, just quickly, if you've got your plants in pots and you're not sure if it's going to need water, then lift the pot up, and if it's really light, then probably the soil's getting dry and it needs watered. But if it's, and particularly, the plant might be wilting, it might be saying to you, I need water. But it could be that the plant's got too much water and it could be wilting then as well. So if you pick up the plant and it's really heavy, then sometimes if you tip it on its side, you might get a shock, the amount of water that comes out because the plant's waterlogged. This particularly with house plants. What else can I say about watering? Just don't water them every day. Water them maybe every 2 or 3 days, and make sure you give them a really good drink, but not every day. So I think that's me kind of covered watering. I'll pass you over to Kate and she can do the next couple of slides.
Okie dokie. I'm going to have to work from it's now gone white and I can't see anything. So I think on this slide a picture of some radishes. And Margaret, what do please?
Right, this one is observe what's going on.
Yes, so it's got a picture of the radishes, and what else is on there?
Oh, it's got a picture of the potatoes with the leaves filled up.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, so this is, some of you to start with had some problems with the compost, and you were noticing this because things weren't growing properly or the leaves were slightly deformed. So this is basically, if you think something looks weird, and it doesn't take long to work out what looks normal and what doesn't, then there probably is something amiss. And this could take the form of leaves looking oddly shaped or oddly coloured, or the growth habit just looks very different. So if we can go to the next slide, Ross, please. So the next slide shows some things that you might see. So things such as radishes and lettuce can quite often bolt. So there's a picture of this on the left-hand side of the radishes where they've shot up and they're actually going about to start to flower. And this is something that happens when temperature changes or day length changes, and it's actually just the plant trying to set seed. With the radishes, those radishes would now be quite woody and quite bitter, so possibly not very nice to eat. So if you saw with lettuces, however, you could still pick and use the leaves, but you're probably looking at taking them out the garden pretty quickly and probably re-sowing. And then another thing that we started to see in the tatties just this last couple of weeks was the leaves curling, the top leaves curling. And it looks like it's just shriveling up a little bit. And if we go to the next slide, I think we've got the picture of
yeah, the one that we were just on. Sorry, we're just, if you go back to that other slide there, Ross, it's showing you the black leg. Is that what you're looking?
So if you see the leaves of your tatties starting to shrivel up at this time of year, it's probably not going to be blight yet, but it could be something called blackleg, where it's a bacteria coming on the seed tatties themselves, the ones that you planted. And particularly as the weather gets wetter, it causes this rot at the base of the stem. And so if you see something like that, then you need to take out the whole plant because you don't want it sort of staying in the soil and spreading. Can we have the next slide, please, Ross? Margaret, can you remind me what's on the next slide?
Right, it's the next one after that, Ross, because we've done the bolted radish now and the aphid damage on the char. Well, the next slide is the signs that the potatoes are ready for harvesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about the chard and the aphid damage on the chard?
You might be seeing that on your beetroot or maybe on some of the leafy crops.
Go back one, Ross, sorry. Sorry.
Thanks, Margaret. I
Yeah,
can't see.
sorry about this. Yeah, it's flying blind, isn't it? That's the one now. Yeah.
So you might be seeing on some of your leafy things. So you could be seeing it on chard, on radish leaves, on lettuce leaves. Little sort of pinpricks of holes, mottled colours, and this is just sap sucking insects. That's quite a tongue twister. Having a meal, aphids. It could be leafhoppers. Any of these things. So it might look a bit unsightly, but for these leafy crops, it's still absolutely fine for you to eat. And unless you get a really severe infestation of aphids, you're probably not going to have to do anything about it. Hopefully all the bugs and beasties in your garden are going to feed on them and control them naturally. So yeah, that's just a few things to look out for. And maybe if you've seen something different in your crops, we can have a chat about it at the end. I'll pass over to Margaret to talk about harvesting tatties.
Harvesting potatoes. So we're on to slide 6 now, Ross, please. That's it, grand. So what are the signs, for those of you on the Tatty project, what are the signs that your potatoes are getting ready for harvest? Well, not just on the Tatty project. If you've got potatoes in your garden, you get different kinds of potatoes. You get main crop potatoes and you get what we call first and second earlies. And first earlies are like your Jersey potatoes. They're the first potatoes, the early potatoes, the new potatoes. And they're ready after about 12 weeks. So Charlotte, the potatoes that everybody's got for the tatty bags are called Charlotte, which is a nice kind of waxy seed potato. It's a salad potato, sorry, not a seed potato. And these are second earlies, so they should be about 90 days after planting. But sometimes they'll be quicker than that, sometimes they'll be slower than that. So the signs to look for is wait for your potato to start flowering, because if it's starting to flower, then that's a sure sign that it's forming those little potatoes in the soil. So if you wanted really small, tasty potatoes, you could rake around in the compost there and get your potatoes out. Or if you want them to get a little bit longer, then, or a little bit bigger, just wait till they've all finished flowering and maybe give them another week or so. You'll notice in the slide here that the bottom leaves on the potatoes are starting to go ever so slightly yellow. And you'll also see, if you look closely, that there's like little brown freckles on the leaves. So these are signs that the leaves are getting old and tired and the plant's thinking it's done its business for the year. It's going to die down now, so it'll start to flop and it'll start to just look a little bit manky, really. So that's time to dig up your potatoes. Do it on a sunny day, leave them for a couple of hours on the ground, put them in a sack or a large paper bag, unwashed, and then you can store them in a cool place. But certainly with new potatoes, it's just get them in your bag, run up to the kitchen, get them in the boiling water as quick as possible, and then eat them because they're delicious. If your potato leaves start to get much bigger patches, like, you know, half of the leaf is going brown, then you might have blight. And I suppose most people have heard about the blight because it affected Ireland in the 1800s. And blight is horrible. I mean, it will literally, in 24 hours, it will just attack your entire potato patch. The whole lot will collapse and it goes really mushy. So if you think you've got blight, you've got to act really quickly. Just cut all the green plant away, put it in the bin, leave your potatoes in the ground for another week or so that none of the spores from the fungus get onto the potatoes, or you won't be able to store them. They'll rot in storage. And most important thing with your potatoes is to remember to weigh them and make a note and send it in to us so that we can see, well, we can read how much weight you've actually produced. So next slide, Ross, is slide 7, I think. Harvesting and thinning. So, you know, the people that have got raised beds are growing a variety of vegetables. You might have beetroot, spring onions, radishes, lettuces, beans. You might have pulled some of them out and you might be onto courgettes or whatever. So different vegetables, you can crop them in different ways. So some of them, you can only pick them once, like the beetroot. When you pull the beetroot out of the soil, that's it. But things like lettuces and spinach, you just keep cutting and coming again and pick them regularly. Pick the older leaves, not the young leaves, pick them regularly. And you're trying to keep the plant young, producing all these young leaves. If you don't pick it, the plant matures and then it just wants to produce seeds and die off. So if you don't pick them regularly, you'll lose them. Courgettes, pick them quite early on as well. Keep looking under the leaves. If you miss any, they'll turn into working great marrows. And you can keep picking courgettes till the frost kills them off. Beans and peas. I know, Mary, you've been wondering when your beans and things are ready to pick. So have a feel of the pod, the bean pod, and it should be turgid. When they first start, they're quite flat, particularly with peas, and then the beans and the peas start to swell up inside them. And as soon as they've occupied all the space inside the bean pod or the pea pod, it will be quite turgid. So if you can press and it gives, then you probably still need to leave it for another couple of days. Give them a good water when they're coming up for harvest, because that helps them swell the seeds and things. Leaves, again, if you're picking them, try and make it a really clean cut. Don't leave bits lying on the ground, because that encourages the snails and the slugs and everything. And as Kate said, if they start to send up that central spike, that's them producing seeds, so you probably just pull them out at that point. Root crops, when you sow them, try not to sow them too densely, because they need space for the root to expand. And you'll find sometimes if you grow them in clumps like I did for you, you'll have 3 or 4 maybe in one group. So you would hold on, in the picture there, if you hold on to the 2 smaller beetroot and then take the bigger one in your other hand and gently twist it out, then those 2 smaller ones should carry on growing and they've got a bit of space to grow. If you've planted them too thick and they're just coming up and it's just ridiculous amount of plants, then you want to thin them. And you need to be quite careful about that, because you don't want to disturb the roots of the plants that are growing. So sometimes if they're really tricky to pull out and you're going to pull a whole lot out, just go along with a pair of scissors and cut every alternate set of leaves off right at the soil, and that little root will just die back. Also, don't just think, right, well, I've picked the radish and throw the leaves away, because if you've got a lot of quite nice young leaves, you could try radish leaf pesto. We were saying at the beginning, you could put beetroot leaves in salad. So just have a look online and see if there's other things that you can do with your plants, because sometimes we throw away things that we could actually be eating. Herbs, if you've got herbs in your raised bed now, cut them regularly, keep them going, keep them young, you're getting the nice tasty shoots. Onions and garlic, you'll only get one harvest with them. They'll be ready to pick when the leaves fall over, so lift them, dry them off and store them somewhere. They'll be great. And cabbages and cauliflowers, keep an eye on them. Broccoli, when they're starting to ripen, because the actual bit that we eat of the broccoli or the cauliflower, that's just actually a flower head, and if we don't pick it at the right time, it just spreads open and it flowers. So keep an eye on those. Can't think of anything else to say. What was on the slide? Repeat harvest, wait till they're big enough. No, I think I've covered harvesting and thinning. So we're on to slide 8 now, Kate, which is bare soil, and think about resowing.
So maybe some of you have harvested crops already from your raised bed, and you actually have some blank space, which is always exciting. What are you going to put in it? So you had modules of seedlings that you planted at the start of the project, but you now have, there's still time enough to sow direct sow, which just means you're sowing seed directly into the soil. And there's a list on that slide, which I can't see, of the plants that you could sow direct from seed. Okay. And given that we can now actually buy seed online, you couldn't a couple of months ago, there just was so much demand. All of those crops would be perfectly fine to sow now for growing outside and harvesting autumn, and some of them would go on into the winter time.
So it's lettuce, baby turnip, pak choy, corn salad, chard and kale is your list.
A lot of them are leafy things, but like the oriental greens, like the Chinese cabbage, spinach would be hardy enough to survive frosts. Baby turnips obviously are a root crop, but they're also quite hardy to survive frosts. If you're looking into next year, and you could also use that spare space to direct sow some flowering plants. Okay, not going to be edible, but if you're wanting to encourage pollinators into your garden, now's a great time to sow plants such as foxgloves, wallflowers, night-scented stock, sweet violets, that sort of thing. And you could sow them, I must admit I do tend to sow them into pots and then prick them out, but you could sow them into the ground also and then move them into their final space later in the year. And Margaret was reminding me that because we've been shut down for all these months, if you look online, there is still bargains to be had for small plug plants or perhaps slightly larger plug plants than the companies were originally intending to sell them as. So you could also, if you don't want to go down the seed route, you could look at buying plug plants to put in to fill your blank spaces. And we can maybe have a chat about things that you might choose to plant in there. And then the one thing that we talked about, Margaret and I, the other day, was growing tatties for Christmas. If you're into the tatty growing thing, is looking for tatties now to plant come August. You have to chip them, grow the little shoots to get them started, and then planting. It wouldn't be something you could do outside. You'd need to have them in a pot so you could move them into a more sheltered, frost-free environment. So possibly not for everybody if you don't have that undercover space. So I think we'll probably go to any questions now, because that's kind of the interesting bit where we hear what's gone right and what's gone wrong with your gardens.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Margaret and Kate. If I can ask everybody to unmute themselves and put their hands together and give Margaret and Kate a round of applause for doing a fantastic job there. So it is such a small group. If you do want to unmute yourself and just ask questions away, it should be able to. We should be able to manage all the good people.
Silence.
I wanted to ask about courgettes, because mine are going great guns now, and I've never grown them before. So I know you showed us how to merge the flowers so that we get courgettes. How do I know when to pick them, or is it just personal choice whether I want a big courgette or a little courgette?
Okay.
It's very much. It's very much personal choice, because they will grow remarkably quickly, and if they're outside, the more rain you get or the more water you give them, the quicker they will grow. So I like them a little bit smaller, a bit more manageable, but if you have a big family to feed, maybe you want a monster courgette. But with most things, most vegetables are slightly, I would say, tastier when they're that little bit smaller. So I would go for whatever fits your family recipes cooking. That's what I would go for.
So it's not ever too small to pick or too
no,
big.
I mean,
I guess that's what I'm trying to understand.
No, it's not ever too small to pick if that works for you. I mean, restaurants, some fancy restaurants will pick the courgette flowers and deep fry them. Of course, if you do that, you don't get courgettes from that particular flower, because you need the flower to get the courgette fruit. But no, whatever suits you. It's never too small. The plant will, as long as it's still flowering, it will continue to produce more courgettes. So I would go for if you haven't picked one yet, I would go for it and try it.
And is there too many flowers for one plant to sustain? So mine's got about 12 buds at the moment on each courgette plant.
Is it in the ground or is it in a pot?
It's in a raised bed.
It's in the raised bed. I must admit, I think courgette plants, like lots of plants, if it isn't getting enough food or water, it will actually just drop flowers and they won't fertilize and become courgettes. So if it's producing flowers, it's probably quite happy and will produce a ton of courgettes. Courgettes are one of those things where in allotments, you plant them, and anything more than a couple of courgette plants is too many courgette plants, basically, because you just
planted 4, so we're probably going to be inundated with courgettes then.
Have a good glut.
We didn't know.
No, we're going to your house for courgettes.
Yeah,
I'll share some courgettes.
Yeah.
They're great. They cover the ground really well. They're very productive, and if you've got a freezer and you can grate and freeze them, you can sort of make your produce last longer, because you could put it frozen into anything you fancy, stews, spag bowl, anything like that.
Cake.
So yeah, if they start getting going and you've given them away to all the people who want courgettes, I would start freezing them.
Grand, thank you.
No worries.
Good.
Can I ask, how do you get rid of pests? Because I've started to get slugs and snails eating my lettuce, and I've got little caterpillars that keep on eating my broccoli.
Well, slugs and snails, my brother-in-law's mother had a brilliant idea. She was a market gardener, and she used to go out at night time with a torch and a pair of scissors. And it's very effective. You might not want to do that, but yeah, she'd just go out with a torch and cut them in half. So that's what we get rid of them. Yeah, sorry, Mary, I know your Buddhist sensitivities are slightly offended. Sorry about that. Slugs and snails. Well, try and keep the hygiene. Try and keep the soil clear. You know, try not to have wee bits of withered leaf or something like that on the surface of the soil. Just go carefully around. Make sure, like sometimes you get a pot that's got a rim on it, and the snail can hide in there during the day, or the slug can hide in there. If it's a pot that's on the ground, make a point of lifting them up every now and again and checking, because slugs always get in under pots and they can stay there all day and then come out at night and munch your things, you know. If it's a really, really, really bad infection, you can actually buy these little things called nematodes that you kind of water them into the soil and they attack the slugs and kill them off. Slugs and snails, well, a friend of mine used to just go around at night time, pick the snails out and throw them across into her neighbour's garden and give them a fighting chance to cross the road on the way back. I don't know. I mean, I don't believe in putting down slug pellets and things like that, because you know the blackbirds are going to come along and eat this slug, and it's full of all this aluminium, whatever it is, that dehydrates it. So,
heard about using like coffee grounds. Does that work?
I don't know. It could do. I mean, you can buy copper tape and put that around things, and that's supposed to help as well. Or you can crush eggshell and put it down. That's supposed to stop them, because it makes it a really rough surface for them to go across. I would say don't have anything, if you can, don't have any grassy, weedy patches or other leafy borders or anything near there, because it's somewhere that the slug or the snail can hide during the day, and then it can come out at night and do its 10,000 steps and come and get your vegetables and go back again, you know. So I would try that. Caterpillars, there again, Mary's not going to like this one. Best thing is just get a pair of gloves on and pick them off and squish them when they're little. If they're big, well, it depends how much you want your broccoli leaves, but if they eat all the leaves off your broccoli, then you're not going to get very much actual broccoli off it. So no, it's you've got to judge whether you're more wildlife orientated or whether you're more vegetable orientated, I think, really. You could always pick the caterpillars off and put them somewhere else. Don't do as I did. When I was a little girl, I went to my neighbours and I helped pick all the caterpillars off the gooseberry bushes, and then I left them in a shoebox on our windowsill. And the cat jumped up on the windowsill in the middle of the night, knocked the shoebox off the ground, and about 1,000 caterpillars just went everywhere, you know. So,
I used
you
to
were popular.
I used to catch the bumblebees.
One other thing for slugs and snails. So there's, as Margaret says, there's physical control, like physically taking them off. You could just, if you've got a wild patch of ground somewhere near you, put them in a bucket and go in. My dad is always rehoming baby rabbits from his garden up the glen, so he'll catch them and put them up the glen. You could do the same with your slugs and snails if you don't want to squish them. So physical control, removing them, and then the other thing to do is, as Margaret says, is making sure that, so quite often they will, I know we've given you a wooden raised bed, but they quite often like hiding round inside, you know, sort of just if you've got a lot of stones or wood, they like that sort of environment, so looking around those areas. And then the other thing for the caterpillars is brassicas particularly, is caterpillars are very attractive, cabbage white, you know, all that sort of thing on your, so brassicas, I mean what you just talked about, your broccoli, so cauliflower, kale, cabbage, and this is where gardening companies make their fortune, selling you nets to net brassica crops, and that's quite often what people would do on allotments. If you see sort of hoops and nets, quite often it'd be brassicas underneath, so stopping the butterflies getting in to lay their eggs and turning into caterpillars and munching your crops. But on a small scale, I think, as Margaret says, the only thing to do is physically take them off. And that will stop them. That's the only. And remember to look on the underside, because quite often the eggs are on the underside of the leaves.
Or Mary, get us to come around and take them off for you.
I haven't had a problem as far as I can see, actually. I seem to have been okay with.
Your birds are getting them.
I feed a lot of birds, so yeah, my birds are probably getting them.
My snails go
and
to
I thought
land.
of something else for slugs and snails, and I've completely forgotten it. My mind has gone blank. But yeah. That's
Did you say that, Lily, about snails?
My snails go to landfill.
All right, okay. I suppose if we were in Spain or France, would starve them for a day and then eat them, wouldn't we?
I suppose that.
Oh,
With
that was
lots of garlic.
beer traps. So if you,
Oh
it is-
yeah.
so you can get something where you just sink like a plastic cup or a waterproof container into the ground with you have to the cheapest beer that you've got, and just sort of a slate over the top, and the slugs and snails are attracted to the beer, so they go in and they drown. Obviously, it does work, but it's a horrible slimy mess to get rid of. I mean, it's really stinky. So that's an option. Yeah, that's one possibility.
I just pick them up and put them into landfill. I'm just
put them in the brown bin.
Right, okay, yeah.
What about salt? I know people that used to sprinkle salt for slugs.
Yeah, I know, it's a bit cruel though. Yeah, it's cruel.
Is it crueler than snipping them in half with scissors, though?
I think cutting them in half with scissors is probably more instant. You know, when you water them with salt, you dehydrate them, so it's quite a slow. I'm not saying that I endorse cutting slugs in half, but I'm just saying that
it certainly works.
This lady had a market garden, and that's what she used to do. So
yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's effective. Pair of scissors and a torch, Willie. That's what she used
to
do.
Yeah.
At least Willie's sending them away to the tip.
I'm recycling them.
So what else? Green fly. You know, sometimes you get little green or black flies on all the juicy shoots and things like that. So you can just make up some soapy water and spray them with that. Or you could crush some garlic and put it in water and spray your plants with that. That might help. You know? But I guess just keep an eye on things. And if you see a build-up of something, you can blast it with a spray of water and wash them away. Or just keep your eyes open. You know, as we said in one of the slides, it's just observing everything really is the important thing. And if it's a hot, sunny, windy day, then you know your plants are going to lose more water than if it's a shady, humid day when it's raining or something, you know. So don't automatically think every Monday, Wednesday, Friday I'm going to water, or you know, just look at the environment, and just the more you go out in the garden, the more you'll see and the more you'll learn. So any more questions?
See on the tatties, mine are starting to bud. We put ours just in an individual tub, which
right.
The shaws are huge, and I'm worried now that there's too much shaw and there's not going to be much tatties underneath. But see, once we take them out, what Kate was saying about putting more in for the winter, could I just take potatoes that sprouted and put them in, and then if I was moving the tub, stick them in the garage when it was colder later on?
I would have thought so, yeah, Kate.
Yeah. So this is probably my farming background coming in, and I would always, so you're saying could you reuse some of the tatties that you lifted and replant them for your Christmas parties?
Or even one from, you know, because I tend to just put them in a basket under the sink. So sometimes you get them sprouting, and to be honest, one of the tatties that's out there was one like that. I thought I'll chuck it in and see if it comes.
I guess I'm supporting our Scottish farmers Scottish farmers produce the bulk of the seed tatties for the whole of the UK, because we are so far north, the aphids don't get up here and the virus don't get up here so much. So I would always, and I guess I'm thinking more from a commercial background, you will absolutely get tatties from a sprouted tatty from under your sink. You might bring in blackleg or some of the seed-borne diseases, because that potato was grown for eating rather than seed potatoes. However, you know, we bought seed tatties for Bannockburn House, and they've come down with blackleg also. You know, so in an ideal world, you would buy something that said it was a seed potato, because it's probably going to be more disease-free, so it should give you a better crop. But if you're only after 3 tatties for a pot, then you can't buy 3 seed potatoes. You can only buy a bag of, you know, whatever it is, 2.5 kilos. So absolutely, if you know, it's if you're doing it on a large scale, you'd always buy the seed tatties. If you're doing it to get a harvest for Christmas, then I'd go for you know, whatever suits. But there is a reason why they do all the sort of seed tatty thing. But you know, if you need to be able to move, like you said, you had somewhere you could move your pot undercover, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that would be okay, because obviously when the frost comes, or as it gets colder, tatties outside, the shores would be, the tops would be killed off by any frost, so it needs to be able to be moved inside. But don't worry that your shores are really tall. That just means that you should get a really good crop, because the more tops photosynthesizing, doing their thing, the more nutrients going down into the soil, and so you should get, don't worry about the tops getting huge. That's a good thing. That's a good
well, that's
So Christmas dinner's looking quite good here. We've got potatoes
Yeah.
from Anne, we've got courgettes from Gaynor and beetroot from Willie, broccoli from Sheila, beans from Mary.
Aye.
Amanda, have you been growing anything? Not yet.
I've been trying to grow tomatoes rather unsuccessfully, but it's my first go, so
Right.
learning some information here.
What's unsuccessful about them?
They've got waterlogged
Oh,
and
right,
all the
okay.
rain, so I've been tipping out the pots every night to get rid of all that excess water, but they're just, the leaves just aren't looking that great now. I think they've got too wet and too damp, so I'm trying to dry them off.
Okay.
So
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of rain recently, hasn't there? And it really, the first couple of months, it was great if you were growing tomatoes outside, but it's not so good now because the nighttime temperature is just that wee bit cool. But we might get, it's school holidays, isn't it? We might get a warmer autumn by the time the school go back, maybe we'll get some good weather. Yeah. So, any other issues, Mary? No?
No, fine.
Good. So, and everything's growing well.
Yeah.
It has, I think, mostly, hasn't it? Your stuff has been good. Aye. So, what about you, Ross? Do you grow anything?
Well, I've been redoing my garden, so I've just recently actually built a raised bed. So I had a lot of strawberries in there, and lots of pots. So I've transplanted them into the raised bed, but I built it quite large. So what I've done is, I forget the name. I think it's something like called hugelculture. But I just went into the woods and I got loads of logs and I filled up the majority with that. But what I've been noticing is with the heavy rains, a lot of the soil has been cracking or subsiding almost. But I guess my problem has been, well, what my question was going to be is, I've only recently done it, so what can I plant now that would crop? But you already answered that in the last slide. But it's the birds have been getting at all my strawberries, so they're looking really good. And then I went to go and pick them, and they're all gone. So I'm upset at that, so I'm thinking nets over the raised bed. But any other suggestions, maybe?
A gun?
No.
A gun.
Your best bet.
Soft fruit you need to protect. You need, because it's like a sweetie shop for all the birds. Even if you could do it, that's why you're probably best having them sort of together in one area, because you could use canes to make a structure, or even better is if you've got some flexible pipe like the blue alkathene pipe for water pipes, or a piece of metal you could bend to make hoops, and then fruit cage netting. There's really no way around it, unfortunately, because it's like a sweetie shop for birds.
Then that's maybe leads me into a nice. I like having my bird feeder outside because I get all the birds there, but it's attracting a lot of rats and mice. Is there a way and to keep one without the other, or do I just get rid of the bird feeder and get rid of the mice, or?
If it depends what you. I must admit, for bird feeding, I've gone for just like it's more expensive, but there's less waste. Is the sunflower hearts, because then there's very little ends up on the floor. Like birds are chucking, when it's a mixed feed and they chuck out everything, and then there's stuff on the floor for the mice and the rats. So that might be, maybe you have to give it a bit of a rest, and then when you restart feeding, go for something where then they don't chuck out the stuff they don't like.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really difficult.
So I agree. We're going to have to try things. But yeah, that's a good way to.
Yeah.
One of my friends recommended for netting is if you've got any old like greenhouse, like the plastic greenhouses, if the plastic's seen better days but you've still got the poles and the fittings, you can cut down the poles to make a frame with those. So I'm on the lookout for any old greenhouse poles that anyone has, because my greenhouse is still in one piece, so that scuppered me because I don't have old poles, but if anyone has any from an old plastic greenhouse that's seen better days, I'd love to recycle them for you.
I'm going through a lot of the old marquees at the
Oh, yeah.
house to get that cleared up for the toilets, Gainer. So they've got the wee connections thing, so you can just run a thing over that. So
yeah, because
there's
you
a
can
few
cut
of
the
them.
poles to make the perfect length for your veg bed and just lift it up and over as and when you need it. So you don't need to worry about doors in meshing and things like that. You can just create a good frame. So yeah, I'm up for recycling those for you.
Excellent.
You know
Yeah,
me, I'll take
definitely on
anything for
board.
free.
Yeah, I think we're probably getting to the end of the call because there's so few of us here just now. But I was just thinking, because this is a recording, if anybody's got questions that they want answered, if they just send them in, maybe on the Facebook page, or would they send them to Sheila or Ross? What do you think? If people send them in, and we can try and help them.
Yep, can do.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can put a wee email out to everybody, even if the people that didn't come along today. Or are you going to send the video out to everybody, Ross?
Yeah, I've got a few
That's
bits of video to do, and so I'll send this out to everybody, and then I'll just tag along with the email that I send out any questions on your raised bed.
Ross, does it go on the website as well?
We can put it up on the website. Once the new marketing person begins, we can get that to them, and they can get it uploaded onto the website, will it? Yeah.
Right, because I think it's a really useful morning, and what do you call it, for all the new people here, or new people to grow in plants and things like that. I think it's a fantastic thing. So I think it would benefit a lot of people. So
good. Well, certainly for anyone that's been growing the potatoes, I hope they've enjoyed doing it, and people that have got raised beds, it seems
it's superb.
Success.
I've enjoyed the raised beds.
That's
Chuffed
good.
a bit.
Well,
Chuffed a bit.
Right, you have to plan next year's raised bed then. And as Kate said, don't leave the soil empty. See what you could put in over the winter. You could go to the supermarket and get some herb plants. You could get chives. You could get, what would last over the winter? Maybe rosemary. You might get a couple of little rosemary bushes in, or you could put some thyme in maybe, or something like that. And then at least you can nip out, get some parsley, get that growing, and then you can nip out the back door and get your herbs when you're cooking.
Does anybody want parsley? I've got loads of parsley.
That worked for us. We've got that.
I've got a massive bay bush as well, which started off as a tiny, tiny little plant, and it's now huge. So I've got loads of bay leaves if anybody needs some.
God.
Christmas dinner's definitely looking good. Strawberries for pudding as well.
I just want to grow stuff over the winter. So it's just suggestions for that, really.
Leeks, if you can get leek plants just now.
Leeks and
that would be a good idea.
It might be getting towards the end of actually being able to get hold of plants, but maybe if you go online, you could get some young leek plants.
What about parsnips and turnips, Margaret?
Turnips, I think, Kate, you can probably plant them just now, can't you?
Yeah, sorry, I'm still on a white screen. I can't see anybody. So yeah, turnips is particularly if you go for the baby ones like Snowball, or it sounds a bit bizarre, but gold ball is apparently one that's really good as baby turnips. So yeah, you could absolutely go for sowing turnips from seed now. Yes.
You might get beetroot and kohlrabi. That's another thing you can grow at this time of year. I'm trying that for the first time, and I think it's kind of like a turnip, but you can eat it and cook it and things like that. So you could grow that just now and start it off. It's like a kind of brassica. It's related to the cabbages and things like that. But certainly, if you get some kohlrabi seeds and start them, it's not too late for that.
And the cucumbers, do they grow over the winter, Margaret?
No, not unless you've got a heated greenhouse.
Right. Okay.
They're like courgettes, they're quite soft plants, fleshy and things.
Well, any suggestions for the winter stuff would be appreciated.
What else would you do just now at this time of year? Let's think. Spring onions, I suppose. Parsnips take quite a long time to grow, so really they needed to be in the ground kind of March, April. I think your turnips probably your best bet. Leeks, if you can get them. Celery has been in the ground before now.
If anybody wants spring onions, I'll bring them up next week. I've got an abundance of them. So
I think you've cheated, Willie. I think you've just gone to the supermarket and bought great big bundles of things and stuffed them in your
No.
taking photographs and said, this is it.
this is the third time I've thinned them out. So,
Oh, well, I'll give you my raised bed anytime. There is nothing growing in it. So definitely got a dodgy batch of compost.
nah, listen, I'll have to leave you. I'll have to leave you.
Yeah, I'll have to go as well.
Good.
There
Well,
was only...
thank you for joining us. No, thanks everyone. That's been good. Thanks, Kate. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. I need to go as well.
Bye.
Bye.
Take care.
Good day.
Bye. I'll see
Thanks, Ross.
you
Thank you.
possibly later.
Yeah.